Good evening, everyone. We are now in the final segment of Leviticus chapter 23. We have been dealing with an entire year of appointed times. What is important in the Moed? A Moed is actually a time where God has fixed to meet with the children of Israel. Now, we may not think very much about appointed time. Genesis chapter 1, when God put in place the sun, moon, and stars to tell time, to help them realize when is the proper time to come and meet Him, there is a particular significance because no other gods, no other Elohim tells their people when to meet. Now, Jehovah, the God of Israel, is the true and living God that really fixes a time to come together with his people. It's a very unusual practice. And so, Moed, appointed time, literally means God has fixed a specific date, a specific time of the year, and how he wants things done. His appointments, his rules. Now, I've been trying to help us understand that God actually fixes a lot of things. God's land, God's rules. God's people, God's rules. God's house, God's rules. God's festivals or feast times, God's rules. God's appointments, God's rules. All of this is to tell the children of Israel that Jehovah is God and man shall always be man. That's basically what God is trying to say. In all these things that he's trying to put together, I am God. So I tell you to come on this day. I tell you what to do. You just do it. That's the idea of God. See, in the ancient days, the ancient kings has absolute authority. And what the kings want, the kings get. Because that is a clear distinction of who is king and who is man. Now, when we come to this particular chapter, for example, God fixes a time. I want to see you on this month, this day, and I want you to do these things. So, God's appointed times, God's rules. We come to the last segment in verse 33. It says, And then Jehovah spoke to Moses. And every time he speaks to Moses, he tells Moses to say, Speak to the sons of Israel. Now, these are the sons of Israel, meaning they are to listen to what Moses has to say, which actually comes from God, and it's for these. And so you notice God speaks to Moses, Moses speaks to the sons of Israel. We have covered the seventh month, the first day. We have covered the seventh month, the 10th day. The first day would be Rosh Hashanah, and they are preparing the judgment, the introspection, the self judgment is important. Comes the 10th day, there's a fast, and there is the day of atonement. Now, I put it in the plural because that's how the word is. It is an atonement for many things. Leviticus chapter 16. So it's a day of atonements, atoning many things. Now we come to verse 33. This would be the 15th day of this seventh month. Very specific time. This is an appointed time, a moed. It will be called the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, they call it the feast here and not the day because this is Hag. By this word, Hag, It is a Hebrew word that talks about festivities. Hag is a feast. A feast is celebratory. And so this is not a sober time, this is a celebration time. And it's a celebration called Sukkot. Now, Sukkot is the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, this is in the plural. Sukkah is the singular. Sukkot is the plural. And it's to be celebrated for 7 days. And remember, God's appointed time, God's rules. And it says here that on the first day, there shall be a holy convocation. Remember, when we first started in chapter 23, when we talked about the Sabbath is also a holy convocation. You don't do any particular work on this day. So a holy convocation is a absolute rest day. That's the first day. Remember, these are God's rules. So for 7 days, you shall make an offering made by fire to the Lord. Now, this in particular, an offering made by fire is an ishe. It is something that you bring to God, and then it is to be burnt. Now, because it's just 7 days, so we take a look at this. We have the first day to the seventh day. The first day is called a holy convocation. Then we have 7 days of offering and ishe. And then it says here, on the eighth day you shall have a holy convocation as well, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. So another offering made by fire, another ishe. So there is an ishe here on the eighth day. It is a sacred assembly, and you shall do no customary work on it. So there is another day called the eighth day, and here we have another ishe. But on the eighth day, there is a holy convocation, another Sabbath. So there are so many Sabbaths in the seventh month. And with this, then they are told, these, verse 37, are the feasts of the Lord. The idea of feast, this word feast, shouldn't be feast. I don't particularly like this. These shall be the moed. These shall be the appointed times which you shall call holy convocations. What are holy convocations? Shabbats. To offer an offering made by fire to the Lord, and ishe, a burnt offering, and olah, a grain offering. This is a mincha. A sacrifice. Now, the idea of sacrifice is a sevak. And finally, a drink offering, a libation. A drink offering is a nesakim. A nesakim. Drink offerings, everything on its day. And then it says, besides the Shabbat of the Lord. Now, the Shabbat here would be all the rest days. These kinds of days, the holy convocations, they're all Shabbats. So you shall do no customary work. You can notice there is a lot of Shabbats. And then on the eighth day, it is another holy convocation. So all of these are the holy convocations, the special days where you don't do any work. Besides giving your gifts, the gifts here uh, would be we will call it the matana, right? Matana, matana, gifts. And then all your vows. What are vows? Vows are promises that is made to God. This is neger. Neger. There are a lot of Hebrew words here, never mind. Then the final one, besides all your free will offerings. Now, free will offerings is found in Leviticus chapter 7. It is the Nadava. Nadava. It means that these are uh, as you please, as you feel like it. That's what it means by free will offering. It is not required by God, but you may want to give it because you're happy to, which you give to the Lord. So this is a you and then Jehovah. This is man to God. Man to God. See, it's man to God where you give gifts to God, the offerings to God, because he deserves that. So this is a whole picture of what it means to be a moed, which is the appointed time. That is not feast, they are appointed times. And God has fixed them. That's what Moses is trying to tell them. God's appointed time, God's rules. You must do exactly as God says. And so when you come to God to bring offering, you must bring offerings according to what God wants. That is how all these feasts and appointed times and festivals are actually done. Verse 39. Now, verse 39 gives us a little bit more detail with regards to this Sukkot. It is a celebration, it's a Chag. So, also on the 15th day of the seventh month, when you have gathered the fruit of the land. Now, it's important that in the fall period, they are gathering fruits. Fruits. In the early part of the year, between the Pesach and the Shavuot, there will be the harvest, right, of the the barley and then of the wheat. But at the end of the year, towards the end of the year, which would be around the time of October, then there will be a lot of fruits to be gathered. It says, "You shall keep the feast of the Lord." Now remember, here it says feast of the Lord in verse 39, uh, literally means the Hag, festival, right? This is festival, Hag. It is not Moed. So one of the problems in the translations is sometimes they translate Chag as feast, and then they translate Moed as feast. It is not correct. And so I've tried to help us see that when it is properly translated as feast, it should be referring to Chag. Chag really means to jump around in a celebratory form, right? It is this Chag. And then it says it's a Chag of the Lord for 7 days. So what 7 days? Here, 7 days. On the first day, a Shabbat. See, a lot of Shabbats here. On the eighth day, a Shabbat. And then in God's rules, in verse 40, and you shall take for yourselves on the first day of the fruit. This case, it says on the first day, the fruit of beautiful trees. Let's put it in a different color. The fruit of beautiful trees, branches of palm trees, boughs of leafy trees, willows of the brook. There are four things here. The four things are very specific. The first one is called the fruit of the hadar tree. And here it's a beautiful yellow fruit called the citron. Uh, I guess we can call that ethra or the citron, a yellow fruit that's in the fall. The second is called the fronds of palm trees. These are what we call, it looks like the palm trees actually look like palms. Basically, it is like that. It is a very interesting palm. And so it is like palms cupped together in a stack. And that is used for the Sukkot. And so we have a palm frowned. Then we have another one here, and the palm being the second one. This is the first as a fruit, the branches of a palm as a second. These are not splayed out palms. These are the baby palms, palm leaves that is still in a cusp of, they look like palms, basically. The hand cusp together. The third one is a, well, I guess you can call it a myrtle tree. A myrtle tree. And so a bough of a leaf of the myrtle tree. And the fourth one is a willow of the brook. Now, the idea of a willow of the brook, it is actually a willow leaf. And so there are four of them all put together. Now, the branches of palm has a different name. It's called a lulav, according to the Talmud. But these are the four items that they put together, and they are supposed to wave before God. Now we have the four identified here. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. Now, this idea of rejoice literally means to make merry. Make merry. There is no fasting. It's purely feasting. It's a happy occasion. And so it says, you shall keep it as a hug to the Lord, a feast for 7 days in the year. And it will be a statute forever in your generations. You shall celebrate it in the seventh month. So it is so obvious that you find that it is repeated carefully, repetitively, and reminding them that this is something that they cannot afford to forget. Next, we have this, you shall dwell in Sukkot for 7 days. This is a requirement of God. You are supposed to dwell in Sukkot. Now, when they are in the wilderness, they have Sukkot. But now when you have, well, I guess, well-built homes, what's going to happen? They still have to stay in Sukkot. See, the way that they look at all these, it doesn't matter what has changed. The principle and the purpose of doing Sukkot has a more I guess you can call it a spiritual meaning. And this is what it means. All who are native Israelites shall dwell in booths. The native are the ones born there. It says, and that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. And then Ani, Jehovah, Elohim. Now, this is important, I think, that we should bear in mind. See, all who are native Israelites, these are the natives that is in Israel. We are calling this natives in Israel. I think that would be a better way to say it. Natives in Israel, in the land. And this includes the Ger as well. And they shall dwell in booths. And this is for every generation, so that they know that I, Jehovah, brought them out of the land of Egypt. What does this mean? What meaning does it carry? I think it's important for us to realize that booths, in this case, the sukkah, is, at least today, it is made of three sides. And the three sides are just little poles, and then they put little stilts, I guess you can call it, very flimsy, very flimsy. And over that, they put palm leaves. And there is no proper structure, it is just palm leaves. Now, what does this mean? It means this, that while they were in the wilderness, they had no proper homes. They lived in tents, and they look up, they see the clouds, the pillar of cloud, the pillar of fire, and see God protecting them. And that experience in the wilderness is what this Feast of Tabernacles, or the Chag HaSukkot, is all about. It is to remember the experience of the forefathers in the wilderness when they had no land yet. They are still traversing a place where there is no particular trail because they just have to follow where God wants to go. And their dependency is completely on God. And so when you look up, there is no structure. It could be destroyed tomorrow. And so their faith is on God to protect them, provide for them, and ensuring that they have peace so that when they get to the promised land, they can celebrate. And so now, when they go to the promised land, they are to do this. You will be natives in Israel, and all those who live in Israel with you, who are Ger, will also live in booths. This is an instruction for them to do when they are in the land, when they are at peace. But it was given to them when they are in the wilderness. So it is a very interesting proposition by God, that now that you depend on me, we're not going to talk much about it. But when you get into the land, when you have peace and harmony, when you have conquered the land, you hold this feast and you celebrate it with these four items: the citron fruit, the lulav, the palm branches, the myrtle leaves, and the branch of a willow. Then you put yourself a sukkot and you stay there and, well, sort of live there as an experience of what happened in the wilderness, and learning to trust in God rather than in men. And that's the whole experiential thing. All these fruits and palm leaves, The waving of the palm never comes in the Pesach. The waving of the palms always come on the Sukkot. And so the waving of the palm leaves really is a demand by God. God's appointments, God's rules. Whether you like it or not, you bring the four elements together, and that's all God wants. Now, you find that a bit strange, obviously, but the entire series of appointments is strange because no God has ever demanded of the people except Jehovah, their God. From the first month of the year through the seventh month of the year, God has made it a point that the Israelites are to do these things to be holy. Not only just observing the feast, but have the Sabbaths, the Shabbat, to rest on the specific day, not on the days that he doesn't want, but on the days he wants. So, what does that tell us? In conclusion, you can see that it is God's feast, God's Chag, God's Moed, appointed time, so that man, the sons of Israel, will just obey to honor God in these Chag and the appointed times, so that everyone around can see these peculiar people. Why are they doing this? It was told by God to do so. And hence it is a display of obedience. You see, the Sabbath, Exodus chapter 16, is a test of their willingness to obey God. And all the appointed times is also a test to see if they obey God. God didn't give them a burdensome appointed times. God only gave them a specific time for them to remember who God is and who man is, to do as he says. That's it. And eventually, when they get into the promised land, a very specific place that God will put his name, and they will do that there. So God wants them every now and then to demonstrate that they remember that they are still humans and to display that they honor God. And that's the purpose of the Moed. Besides this, we are clearly told that Moses received it for the sons of Israel because it has meaning for them. For all their generations, they are to remember that God is the one who brought them out of Egypt from Pesach to Shavuot to Rosh Hashanah to Yom HaKippurim and now to Chag HaSukkot. And this whole series of things, God's appointed times, God's rules, is really to test the Israelites on their free will, that they would do according to what God says. Now, I have often repeated that whatever we read, say in chapter 23, is the high level, the overview, because in actual fact, if they were to sit down to do it in detail, they would actually need their oral traditions. And in their oral traditions, they would have fixed exactly what they need to do to bring, how many, how big, all the details come from the oral tradition. But as we read this, we are mindful of who God is. He wants it done to show that he is God, that these people respond by obeying to know that he is God and they are merely man. So God's appointed times, God's feasts, God's Shabbat, God's rules. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.